Hey everybody, this is Dan. Today I'd like to share one of my blitz games with you that I played on chess.com. In this game I had the white pieces and was able to win in just 5 moves due to the fact that black made a mistake that I think is very instructive as far as a kind of thematic mistake that one player might make in the opening. So the game started out this way: pawn to e4, pawn to e5, double king pawn opening. Very common. The most common continuation for white here is knight to f3, but that's by no means the only continuation. In this game, I chose pawn to d4, the center game. And normally in this position, and correctly, black will play pawn takes pawn. Okay, so ex d4, pawn takes pawn on d4. And white will continue queen takes pawn, black will continue knight to c6, gaining a tempo on the queen. White will normally retreat to e3, and then white will follow up with moves like knight to c3, bishop to d2, castle queenside. Of course, it may not go this way every time, but it's a fairly simple and clear opening to play as white. So I've actually had fairly good success with it in the times that I've tried it out. So anyway, in this game I went with the center game, pawn to d4, and rather than the normal move pawn takes pawn on d4, black instead played pawn to f6, which is a mistake. So if you were white in this position, how would you continue? If you want to take a minute to just kind of think through what's going on here and what you would play as white in this position, you can feel free to pause the video and press play when you're done with your analysis. Okay, so in this position I played pawn takes pawn on e5, and black actually recaptured, but this turns out to be a very serious error. The computer actually recommends here knight to c6 as the strongest move, which basically means that white is winning a pawn. Taking the pawn on e5 is essentially winning a pawn, because when black takes back, black gets in big trouble. So let's see if we can figure out why that is. So pawn takes pawn on e5, black plays pawn takes pawn. And what would you do here as white? So feel free to take a minute to pause, do some analysis, look for the best move, and press play. Okay, in this game white plays queen to h5 check, which turns out to be decisive and winning. This check leaves black with actually only 2 legal replies, both of which are problematic. In the game, black played pawn to g6, which we'll look at first. It's not really necessary to go too deep into this line, because we see after pawn to g6, white simply plays queen takes pawn on e5 check, which is a fork of the king on e8 and the rook on h8. So white will win the rook on h8, and white has a substantial advantage in this position. It doesn't really matter here how black gets out of check, that rook is going to fall. And not only that, the king could end up being in trouble as well, depending on how the game goes. So at the very least, white will have a substantial material edge. So this is not to be recommended. However, after this move, queen to h5 check, black really doesn't have a better option. In fact, pawn to g6 is slightly better, according to the computer analysis. The other option is king to e7, which is also very bad for black. So what would you play here as white? Feel free to look and pause and press play when you're ready. In the case of this, you can just continue the same way. Queen takes e5 check, and just some example continuations here. They're all bad for black. King to f7, bishop to c4 check, pawn to d5, blocking the check, bishop takes pawn check. Now if queen takes bishop, queen takes queen check, and white is just winning the queen. But for example, if king to g6, queen to g3 check. Now let's see, if we have king to f6, queen to g5 is checkmate. And if we have queen to h5, sorry, king to h5, bishop to f7 check, pawn to g6, queen to e5 check, king to g4, pawn to g3, king to h4, pawn to g3 would be checkmate. So I'm not saying this is exactly what would happen, but these are just some lines that show why black is in big trouble here. In both of these lines after this queen to h5 check move, whether it's pawn to g6 blocking the check or king to e7. In both of these lines, the best black is going to do is just being down significant material, if not getting mated fairly quickly. I guess the g6 move is slightly better because black still does have the chance to at least maintain some sort of king safety, whereas after king to e7, queen takes pawn on e5 check, that king is going to be exposed kind of no matter how black continues. So going back to the opening, what do we learn from this game? After the pawn to d4 move, we look at this pawn to f6 move, and what we see is that it opens up the diagonal leading to the king from h5 to e8. And when white just grabs this pawn, black is really unable to take back. So basically this pawn to f6 move, although it looks like it's defending the e5 pawn, is actually just dropping a pawn. Because when pawn takes pawn is played, there is no pawn takes pawn if black doesn't want to allow this queen check, which causes all sorts of trouble. So in the opening, watch out for playing this sort of pawn advance, as black does here with pawn to f6, which opens up lines to your king and could allow for some really dangerous things as far as checks and attacks on the king. So just watch out for opening lines to your king, and as black here, or in other openings as well, these same sorts of themes will crop up. For example, if white plays knight to f3, black plays pawn to f6, white can actually grab this pawn with the knight, because if pawn takes knight, we have queen to h5 check, and then similar themes. If pawn to g6, queen takes pawn on e5, forking king and rook. If king to e7, queen takes pawn on e5, and black's got problems once again. So in other openings, this can also take shape. So basically the lesson here is watch out for making this sort of pawn advance that opens up lines to an attack on your king in the opening. And as the opposing player, if you can see this kind of move being played, then you can kind of see how you can take advantage of it by taking the opportunity to attack the king when this weakness is played. So anyway, hope this was helpful and interesting, and thank you very much for watching. Feel free to subscribe, feel free to like this video or any others, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.